Happy Monday.
I like your intro.
Well, welcome to Texas.
Thank you very much.
How long have you been here for?
4 weeks.
Are you allowed to be here?
What is that? We're going to have to mark this podcast as private as well. Yes, of course I'm allowed to be here. I'm a legal visitor on a B visa.
Good. Well, welcome.
Thank
we love
you.
having you here. I know this is like your second home.
It's more like my first home. It's like where I feel most at home, and then, I have to do the stuff everywhere else while I wait to get home. But that's all part of the journey, isn't it?
Yeah. And it's cool that your son gets to study here.
Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, and he's doing a great job, so that's going to be cool. He's going to be a chiropractor, so it means that that's one less thing we have to pay for.
And as we get older, those aches and pains are the real deal, eh?
100%. In fact, we should sell dates and services for free. So we should just go like, if you need a chiropractor in 4 to 6 years, you could pay your rates now. Buy in advance. There's a package deal. You buy up front.
Well, there is actually quite a few chiropractors around you, and I did that for, about 8 months to a year. They sell you on, I think it's $24 for your first visit, and then you sign up for, I think, $80 a month. You can go as many times as you like, and you get to know the guy that's going to work on you. And you walk out of there feeling light, but it's something you got to do frequently.
So this is not what we're going to talk about, but I'll share it anyway. I did my first chiropractic visit. I think it was this year. Maybe it was the back end of last. No, it was the back end of last year. I did like 3 or 4 visits. I just couldn't bend and I couldn't do anything. And Keegan actually was like, "Dad, have you seen a chiropractor?" I was like, "No, it's such a schlep." And then he just jumped on my phone and he booked with Cubs in Belito. And I went there, and I'm the most inflexible person, Dom. I can't touch my
Like me as
toes.
well.
Like, oh no, she used to just laugh at me, and then she gave me exercises to do, and I am doing them, Cubs. I really am. No. So I guess I've got to go back.
So who did their Discovery Health assessments in January or February every year, and they made you stand up against the wall, do things that are unknown to the general public, and those who suffer with flexibility, it's a real issue. So I think that's actually quite a fail. I know this is not what we're going to speak about, but it actually made me think of a post that I saw this year where Tash had a bit of a rant on Facebook. She says, Burries is obese.
I saw that. Yeah, and of all people, the guys, I don't know, he's a bit younger than us.
He's got biceps like 3 times my size, legs like my waist.
He looks like The Rock.
Yeah.
I mean, you go tell The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, that he's obese. I mean, come on.
And he's the fittest 53-year-old that I know.
Is he 53?
Yeah.
Jeez, that makes me very sad because he's older than me.
So the algorithm
it's
that
wrong.
those guys are using at Discovery is so offside.
It's because they devved it offshore. So it wasn't...
So apparently they were going to
100%
lose their diamond status now. So she was quite bummed because obviously that affects flights and all of that. But when I saw that post, I was like, yeah, I know that whole system's broken, because just the way they calculate the BMI and all that, just so old school, I reckon. I think we need AI to actually do that more accurately.
I think so.
Yeah.
And that leads into what you should be talking about, and you said you were going to talk about at some stage, which is explaining to people how different, like we've said about like chiropractic and how that works and how medical aid works, and I think people have so much to figure out, especially if you're coming to the US, on how you handle medical and healthy lifestyle and all that interesting stuff, because it's such a big difference.
Yeah, so I reckon we can hang in that space for a couple of minutes. I know we were going to speak on the topic on.
What were we going to talk about?
You actually brought it up. How should we look on a podcast?
Yeah, that was because I said the background is absolutely, this is divine. I mean, it's just great. And we may probably never publish this, but I'm going to take the photo.
We are going to.
So if you see this background on anything I do online, it's going to be like I'm in Texas, like I'm home. So
you can have it.
I'm doing it.
Go for it.
As long as there's no copyright image, so yet. So have we been recording for 4 minutes and 46 seconds?
We have.
We can talk amazing bolly.
Promise you, the thing is, I've been sitting in meetings of late and my headspace goes to, we should actually be podcasting this because there's valuable information out there that a lot of people need to hear. and they might not necessarily have the finance to pay for someone to give them that advice. So the whole aim of this podcast or podcasts that we want to do is bring guys alongside that have learnt a lot through life, and it's just going to be topics that people struggle in, like this whole immigration thing is a higher grade problem for someone that wants to get to America. They certainly haven't made it easy, that's for sure. And then when you get here, then you've got to try and navigate so many other things as well. So just simple things like, what medical aid should I join? They don't even call it that. It's medical insurance. How do I get my phone line connected? It's just all this sort of stuff around trying to get to a level that you were in South Africa when you left. And it requires people to actually walk you through that so you don't get overwhelmed.
I found that it was, because it's first world, and we shouldn't create the impression that it's complicated. It works very well here, but
That's
it's exactly
for sure.
what you said. It's you making the change and the transition and the cultural change, but then you've got all the logistics you have to learn. It's not like you know how to go and connect your lights and water, or how you phone Vodacom or get a Vodacom account, or get a Telkom account in the old days. Like, everything here is different. And so each time you do it, it's a new learning experience, and it's a frustration because you go, I think I know how this works, and it works really well, but people ask you for your social security number or your tax number, and it's like,
or your credit card number. It's quite normal to give that over the phone, and they'll just pull the funds or even pull it from your bank account, and it's relatively safe.
I think you've got to do more of the discussion, Dom. I think you have to do it because it's so topical for South Africans wanting to leave, and especially with all the other stuff going on. And like we said on the South African groups, so many people saying like, oh, how do I immigrate? Like, can we just come across? No. Prepare yourself for cost. You're going to need a lawyer. It's going to cost you a fair chunk of money. And then be prepared to wait. This is not a process that happens in 6 months. Or a lot of people will hear about guys going off to the UK, getting ancestral rights or whatever. And that process happens so quick, like with Lorinda, within a year, and boom, you've got a passport and you're going.
That's similar to like some of the friends I know that have moved or immigrated to New Zealand. That's also quite an easy access point. You just got to really set up a business or get sponsored by someone, which is relatively easy, and they'll get you over because it's such a small population. They're needing tradesmen there, and so you could quite easily get into there if you enjoy that size of island and that sort of weather.
Yeah. Lorinda says it really well. She turns around and says America, it sounds topical, it's not meant in a bad way, but she goes like, America doesn't have an immigration process. It does, but you have to fit into like maybe 3 or 4 buckets.
That's it.
So, you're either coming for work or you're coming on an investment.
Yeah.
But like outside of that, it's not like, oh, just come because we want you. There's no, okay, just randomly come. And some places, I think a lot of countries, you've got to have a specific reason. But America's hard like that. Like if you're coming for work, you've got to actually have the work. You have to have the sponsorship. So it's complicated.
Yeah, I found it quite interesting. I mean, it's the land of the free, home of the brave. And also a lot of people are living that American dream. I never quite understood that till I started spending more and more time here and obviously eventually immigrating here. But when you drive into big cities like even Dallas, there's a lot of immigration companies. And it got me thinking, like you don't see that in South Africa or actually any other countries I've been to. I spent a lot of time in Thailand, China. It's not like you get to the street corner and you see, oh, here's an immigration business, because people generally aren't immigrating there. And that just made me think, jeepers, people really, really, really want to be here.
Yeah.
And that's why people start businesses and they offer that. So just touching on what you were saying now, there's a couple of options for South Africans. I mean, you know a couple of them because you've gone down that road like I have. We've looked at every angle, and obviously things are changing all the time.
Yeah.
But name a few that you think South Africans could use.
Well, we ran 2 routes, which we'll share. We ran the L1, which is really starting a branch of a business you have back home in South Africa and bringing it across here. But very quickly we spent a lot of money and lost a lot. Well, not a lot, but we lost that money. And it boiled down to 2 things, is that those L1 processes, for the guys who go look at them, they think it's an easy option, but it's actually built for corporates. If you were the equivalent of a McDonald's or a Discovery, since we spoke about them, and you were opening up a branch overseas, that's really an easy structure because you get your business set up and then you start to employ quickly. the downsides of the L1 are that there's a high employment requirement. So, we were a small, medium-sized business with 15 staff that took 15 years to build. And in America, they want you to have 15 staff locally, within the first year. And so all of a sudden you start to fail those requirements. And if you don't meet the obligations or around them, and there's nuances to that, but then your L1 is retracted and you don't come. So we followed that. That was the one. And then we've done the sponsorship through work. So we've been very fortunate.
EB3.
The EB3.
Yeah.
So outside of that, that's what we've done. But that's a long process. Involves advertising positions, getting approval from government around your sort of job gradings and salary benchmarks and stuff, and probably a 2-3 year process easily. I mean, you've done it, and so those are the ones.
I've had a few friends that have done the L1 as well, and they also threw a lot of money at it. I think the biggest, when people are applying for an L1, it was developed actually with the intention of the person that sets up the business in America will go back to their native country, South Africa.
Yeah.
In other words, so you essentially sending out a manager or someone that could train up new staff in America for that L1 to grow, for that business to grow. They're going to employ with the intention of you going back to South Africa after the 7 years, and that thing flourishes, that business will flourish. But what often happens is in year 4, people do a change of status.
Correct.
And then they apply for a green card or permanent residency, as we know it. And so that's where guys aim with that. But like Justin was saying, it's true to say you've got to throw money at it. They want to see that the business is actually employing people. Otherwise, they're not going to renew it. Generally, what happens is you get a 1-year approval. If you're lucky, you get a 2-year. I've got a friend that just got a 2-year approval. And then as soon as you get that, you've got to start applying for the next one. It costs a couple of $1,000s every time you do that. And you have to show income coming in there and obviously adding people to the actual payroll. You've got to be paying people. And also they would like it if you could have people on W-2s instead of 1099s. In other words, permanent staff and not subcontractors. That's a big deal.
It's huge. And I think the South African way is, we always think, especially as entrepreneurs, we'll make a plan, we'll make, hustle it. And there's so much advice that I think over 30 of these podcasts, South Africans will hear. Like people say, just go to Mexico and come over the border. And that's a joke. But that's not true. And on the L1, you think, I'll come across and I'll employ cheap labor. But the reality with the L1 is when you do that application process, you have to tell them what jobs you're going to be creating. So you have to say, like, for example, a graphic designer or a salesperson. And the salaries, the W-2s you pay, have to be in line with benchmarks. So you can't come in hyper discount salaries. You're paying proper full salaries, which means your business has to create those revenues. And then what South Africans don't realize is the salaries here, the numbers sound small, but it's really a lot bigger. So you've got to come in with a legitimate business that's doing turnover quickly. Otherwise, you're burning a lot of your own cash.
You mentioned cheap labor. Where do you find that in America?
There's no cheap labor.
Yeah, so what I've found is if you want to run your business legitimately, you have to employ legal people, and you verify them with an online program called eVerify. Keeps you all legal. And realistically, you're not going to find anyone half decent for under $15 an hour that is legal.
Yeah. In
America. There's a lot of illegal people, which sort of a grey area. When I say a grey area, a lot of the building sites have got people that have sort of immigrated, but they don't necessarily have their social security or whatever, so they're employed on those sort of sites at lower rates because they don't have a correct document. Yeah.
And I think we found it, and being honest and transparent about it, like when we came out, we used Dayton to do our distribution, and we paid in cash, and Dayton, our son, and very quickly our accountant said, if you pay cash out of the business, you have to report that to the IRS, and if it's salaries, you have to fill in a 1099, which is a document saying this person has earned an income, in which case they must pay tax on it. So it's there's still ways around it from what we understand, but it's not the same as South Africa. Whenever you're paying someone else, even if it's someone who's a low cost employee, you have to declare that, and it's otherwise you get into trouble. Yeah,
exactly. So the limit you've got is $600 a year.
Yeah. That's
and
nothing.
that's it. Yeah, and so anything that you pay out of the company that you can't justify by the person you've paid. In other words, if you're paying a 1099, which is a subcontract, essentially what you
Yeah.
did, if they don't complete a W-9 form at the end of the financial year, because you've got to submit that, give that to your bookkeeper, she'll submit it to the accountant. In other words, there has to be an out and a reference to who received that by a W-9 form. If you can't produce a W-9 form for that person that you've paid, even if you've legitimately paid them, that actually gets added to your income.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
And there's
so
so
it
many.
means whatever tax bracket you're on, you get, so it's not like,
Sorry,
No,
I'm
there's
pointing.
a
There's a
bunny.
bunny underneath the car outside.
that's the
It's
one
very
we've been
cute.
looking
Oh,
for.
there's another one.
Yeah, there's a few, yeah.
It's early April. This is the 7th of April. So guys, the Easter bunnies are here. They're in Texas.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
So essentially, you have to, it's not like where you can just go to, in South Africa, you could go to the bank and withdraw casual wages.
Correct.
And whether that ended up in a casual wage person's hands or not, it was quite open.
Yeah.
But over here, they're very strict. The IRS, you don't want to mess with the IRS. You want to do it legally and make sure that you get the correct advice.
And then even in your immigration process, so like if you arrive on your green card and you're running a business and then all of a sudden you start to do funny stuff with the IRS, you put yourself at risk, you know, and so that's, you just, it's I don't want to say a minefield because it makes it sound terrible, but there's just so many things to be aware of. And I mean, we've chatted about this briefly before doing this today, and I'm just thinking it's unbelievable because if people watch this, they'll ask questions, and you're going to have tons of questions from people going like, you know, my husband has a job and I don't, and my wife has a job and I don't, and can I come and can the kids come? And I'll come back to the legal thing, otherwise we'll end up talking forever. The one thing we found out in America is, I think why there's so many lawyers is because there's so many people immigrating, but the other thing is there's no free advice. The one thing about America is you can ask a ton of people on a Facebook group, but once you start to go down the road of saying, I need help,
Yeah.
and the people think Americans are rude about it, right? But what we found out was the same with accountants, is it's a highly litigious society. So if someone gives you advice and it's bad advice, then you sue the person. And so what happens is if someone gives you advice and you don't have a paying or client relationship with them, they can't use their liability cover to cover their risk exposure or with insurance. So here, no one gives free advice. Like you'll go to an accountant and say, how do I do tax? And they'll say, listen, you have to be a customer of mine. A lawyer will go, you have to pay for a consultation fee for me to talk to you. And that's purely because if you go back and say, oh, it's bad advice, I'm going to sue you, they go, well, okay, at least my liability insurance covers me. So different to South Africa because you'll go, oh, you know, like someone will just say, oh, let's have a cup of coffee and I'll help you.
So let's jump to the EB3 because that's I know that's something that we know quite a bit about, and the EB3 is actually quite an interesting one. Generally takes about 3 years, and I think where the trick is you have to find a company that's prepared to sponsor you to get you, but also they got to know the whole process that, hello, I'm here for my interview, but by the way, you could only employ me in 3 years' time legally, because that is how long it takes. And I know the guy, when you go onto the internet, you do searches, it spits out different things, but it has to go through a whole process of, your wage assessment goes to Dole. There's just so many steps.
Yeah,
that
you have
need
to advertise the position. You have to make sure that all applicants who come in, what they're trying to do is Dole is Department of Labour, so they want to, again, they assess that you're not trying to underpay someone at a skill level. So
they actually do that calculation for you, and that's what's also quite tricky, because we've heard of cases where Dole will come back and the guy might be applying for a position of 5 or 6 grand a month. Dole will come back and say, no, that position's actually 9 grand a month. And then it implicates the business now, because what do they do?
Yeah.
Because they don't want to actually pay you 9 grand. They're quite happy to pay you 6. So that's where it becomes a bit tricky as well.
I'll be honest, that was my situation. And so, there was a benchmark number. And when Dole came back, they said, no, there was elements of management and stuff and experience in that. And they said the number's high and the company had not agreed the number. And then this is the stuff you don't anticipate. So then what do? So now you have to do a new submission. So the company has to do a new job specification. And, the lawyers help to try and get that benchmarking there. But that goes through another 3, 4, 5 month approval process. So it's complicated. It's
Yeah,
like
it is. I think the biggest challenge is finding a company that is prepared to sponsor you
and not having
and
it.
wait 3 years. I actually shot a message to Elon Musk, not that I expected him to answer. I was hoping. I even did the X thing where you register, so at least my account's
verified
verified.
account.
Yeah, verified account. It's like, dude, like help us out. Like they need to really look at this immigration process, because if you want to make America great again, we need real people here to actually do the work. And we know that immigrants work
Super
actually
hard.
a lot harder because they don't have a choice. They have to make this work.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm sure there's stats out there that say that as well, but that's been our experience with all the people we employ as well, or from other countries, majority from Cuba, Mexico, but they are dedicated to making this work the same as we are, because it's not a case of us just shutting down and going back. You know, we've given up a lot to be here. And so the point is, immigration should be a lot easier if you want to make the country great again in terms of a workforce that's strong and that's going to help grow the economy. So that definitely needs to be looked at, the same as Doge is looking at all the other stuff, because there's so many inefficiencies in the immigration process now that can be sped up by just putting AI in place.
There's the intermediary for, and again, you guys can unpack this further, which you already know, Dom, but the intermediary process is if you do the EB3 and you have to stay out of country, and that's very difficult to find companies who do that for you. The alternative is that you do a H1B visa, which is a non-immigration visa, and it allows you to come work in the country. But that's also, it's limited time period. So, I think it's a year or 2 years, and they're renewable every 2 years with the right to not renew. And so that's high risk. India does a lot of that. A lot of the tech guys come out on the H1Bs.
And there's also a lottery that runs every year
Correct.
for the H1B, because we actually, one of our staff members applies for that every year. She told me today she never got
Never
it.
got
I think
it.
they give out 50,000 of those every year.
But that's the key
And
point,
you pay like
which is,
$800.
yeah, the key point is that you assume, oh, okay, so I'll do an H1B and I'll do the interim while I wait for the EB3. But that's not true, because the H1B has a limit. It's the lottery system. It's actually
Yes.
capped at a number.
Yes.
So if South Africa, it's not the number, but if South Africa only has 5,000 positions and you 5,001, then you don't qualify. So then you can't come. You can't come on an H1B. So then you wait again. So either way, you're in holding processes or you are in a temporary process with high risk, and then the EB3 eventually gets there. So
I think what some of the people that we've got employed with us from India is they come over and they study. And then part of their study is they need to do practical, and then they work for us on W2s.
correct.
While they're actually studying as well.
So
And,
that's also temporary. So Dayton's doing that, right? So Dayton's on an F visa. And while you're studying, you're actually not allowed to work too far outside your field of study. And then when you finish studying, so like if you do I think a 2-year associate degree, he's going to go on to do another 4 years at Parker. But during that time, he can work on campus, but cap number of hours. And then at the end of his qualification, he's got, I think he called it I'm going to lie, it's a SOM or STOP or something. It's an acronym for the period of time you can work as a W2. So it's either 1 year or 3 years. You can get it extended again. And that has to be in the field of study. So you can't study to be an accountant and go be a rocket scientist. And it's non-guaranteed. What that allows and is hopeful is that you work for that year and then run into a process of an H1B or EB3, so the company sponsors you and you go through that process. But at the end of all of it, apart from the EB3, because you're already out the country, F visas, H visas, if the government's not happy or you do something wrong or your time's up, it's like, hey, pack up, go home.
That's
and I think
exactly
people
it.
need to know that.
They give you 30 days.
Yeah,
You got to leave it. You don't want to not do that because you get barred for 10 years. You won't be allowed back here.
yeah.
There was also another interesting one, and I've seen a few friends from South Africa do this, and that is the R1 visa.
That's a religious one.
Yes.
Yeah, become a pastor.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
or you could become a worship, if you're a worship leader, and I've had friends that have done this because they legitimately worship leaders at churches, and they've reached out to different churches in America that have wanted worship leaders, and they've done the interview. Then they've also started that process. I think that is about a 12-month process, and then after that, they don't land you and get a green card after 2 weeks, similar to on an EB3. If you do premium processing, they end up having to wait 4 years before they can apply for a green card. And then it's also under the understanding that that R1 visa is associated with that church.
Yeah, very locked into the entity.
So they're
You
locked
can't
into
come job
that,
hunt.
yeah. You can't just hop off and say, no, actually, no, I'm going to go and work at McDonald's. You're locked in on there.
Yeah.
And also during that whole process time, you're not allowed to be, you know, and so you got to stay out of the country and only come over, because often they come and audit the church to make sure it's legit, and you don't want to be there. You
It's
know,
so,
strumming your guitar.
I'm thinking, we've just spoken about so much, and we know this just because over periods of time, and you've done the EB, H visas, the R visas. I know, actually thinking about it, you know, Warren's dad has come out to California on the R visa. I was thinking it must be so confusing for someone who's ever going to listen to this. Like, you've got a whiteboard there. You actually need to draw all of them up. And I think I once saw a diagram that actually showed the same thing. It basically said, are you trying to do this? And because again, if you're talking to South Africans or anyone else who wants to come here, like, don't have the impression that it's an easy, quick process. Immigration to the US is fantastic. I mean, there's so much opportunity and it's an amazing place, but it's a complicated process to run through.
Yeah, you can't rush it.
Yeah.
And I'm an ape-type personality, so we went through this wait of 2 years while, you know, documents were being processed on this side. We had to go back to SA for like 2 years.
Yeah, that's what
It
the
was
process
just
we're in. It's
waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting, and you've actually just got to, you can't force it, you've got to be patient. And the attorneys also, if they're going to, you know, cross their T's and dot their I's and do it properly, you've got to just know that they're going to be doing it the right way. And if you force it,
yeah, you'll break something.
yeah, definitely. So you just got to sit back, do something else, keep yourself busy, start another business like we did.
One we could wrap with, there is a fast way now, right? A way that Dom and I can't afford to do.
The
Maybe
EB
Dom can.
No, the EB5.
Yeah, so it's
The golden visa.
The golden visa, $5 million. You get a visa with Trump's face on. It's gold.
Yeah.
And what is it? So how long? Like 6 months and you had.
Yeah,
Super
quick. So that, and I don't know if this has changed. I know there's a lot of hype around that, and they've sold a lot of them for $5 million. But when I looked at that, I think in 2015, that was 500,000 or 600,000.
It was low. It was sub $1 million. You know, probably $500,000, like you said. Then it went up to 750, and then I heard it went up to 900, and now it's 5 million.
I actually met a guy in Belito. Charles and I met a guy in Belito that was running a company called The American Dream, and he had this incredible slot on a Sunday night during the advertisements on Carte Blanche.
What?
And you know how many people are locked in on a Sunday night to watching Carte Blanche back in the day. And so this guy's ex-South African. He moved over to America years ago, settled in Fort Lauderdale. Nice warm coastline, Florida, really cool. And he would come across and meet the guys. I think we paid a small fee, sat with us. He said, right guys, this is the deal, 600 grand. And
Was that where your process started? Is that where you got interested?
Yeah, that's where the whole thing started. And then he said 600 grand, we'll have your card in 6 months. And then we just went a different route.
Yeah.
You know. So and then recently, I think it was about a year ago, we went and saw the immigration attorney, and Charles was out here.
That's right.
And I mean, it's quite funny because he asked the question. Well, we went through all the options, and then the attorney asked the question, Mr. Fenter, do you have $1 million? And Mr. Fenter answered, yes, I do, because the EB5 had gone up to $1 million now, which basically was about 18 million rand back then, but it's about 19 and a half at the current thing. So those are the options. So we've got the EB3, we've got the L1, which is if you've got a good business. I was thinking of Eric now. So for Eric coming over here, an L1 would be an option for him, because Ollie's nice and young. You could send Ollie over to set up, because he was talking about setting up not necessarily a foam plant, but where they finish it off. In other words, they buy the foam ready-made and they just do the finishes.
Finishing and go to market.
Because he's supplying a lot of other companies throughout South Africa like that. And once it gets big enough, then he starts producing the foam, because there's some little tricks with that, with the chemicals. So it's L1, R1, EB3, EB5. And so those are the ones that we know. Then you also mentioned the H1B.
Yeah, H1B, temporary
Yeah,
work.
the temporary work one. Yeah.
Can you guys come have dinner? Because it's hot out of the oven, please.
Yeah, and we're going to sign out now because we've been called to dinner and we're having like a
Chili
traditional...
con con.
Yeah, chili con con. It's actually quite a traditional dish here. But
This is
we'll do
cool.
another one of these and we'll get the whiteboard. I agree, because it can get quite confusing. We'll get the whiteboard up and also just shoot us a message if you need some help. We'll point you in the right direction. We've got some good immigration attorneys. We also want to cover things like what does accounting look like? What does medical
Yeah.
aid look like? What does car insurance look like?
How do you
What
buy a
is-
car?
Yeah, how do you buy a car?
Yeah, what does that
What
look
does
like?
business insurance look like? There's a lot out there, and I've taken the time to learn that. I've got a few battle scars along the way, but it's been awesome, eh?
It has.
Yeah, I
It
wouldn't
has
change it because I love learning that sort of stuff.
Well, Dom's 25. Those grey hairs are from all the lessons he's learned. So
A little bit of wisdom there.
just a tad. That's fantastic. Thanks, Dom. That was that.
Cool.